So hello and welcome back to the Carpcast. Our last chat went down really well. There was a lot of nuggets of information, tips, and there was quite a lot we didn't talk about that we sort of spoke about privately. One thing we did do last time, we discussed a bait that I was going to try over the winter on Trent View. I have the pop-ups here. Oh, there's a light in the way. It's probably backwards. Yeah. So I want to go into debate, but just talk about the pop-ups first. So you've done my favorite banana flavoring, which you say is the original recipe from the one I first used, the Hutchie banana that everybody says is the best one. So
Yeah.
you've got the recipe for that. It says ester blend. So what exactly is the ester blend?
Right. Well, the key part of the banana is an ester. So
Yeah.
I've called it ester blend B. The actual original winter mix we did, we blended the banana with a little bit splash of pineapple.
Yeah.
So that became the blend, and the B was the pineapple. But your version, obviously, we've incorporated different base mix into the boilies using all the bits of the king crab base mix.
Good.
So, but the hook baits themselves,
Was a
the esters, the fruit esters, the key parts that naturally attract not only fish but wild animals to food sources.
I always said a good example of a good bait is when you put it in the edge and literally every single critter is stuck to it, and it always
Yeah,
used to be a good test for me because you put some boilies in the edge and that's not the case, and anyone who's ever fished a lake that's rich in naturals will know exactly what I'm talking about. You can't put anything, you can't put, pour the rest of your potatoes or something in the edge. It just gets covered in everything. And there's some baits that just don't, I
no,
don't.
that's right. Yeah.
But I always think if all the naturals like it, then it's attractive.
Oh, without a doubt, yeah. If it gives off a signal, which creatures that feed by instinct. So if they just know it's a food source, then they'll home in on it. And when you
Yeah,
can find those combinations in bait, I say tadpoles is a great one for me in the spring. I
yeah.
first spotted it, a few baits in the margins, went to have a look at them, and all it was a ball of wriggling tails. And we worked out that quite often the hook baits and pop ups we were using at the time, we think was a ball of tadpoles. And pretty
Really?
sure that some of the takes, I'm sure, with the carp actually taking tadpoles or toadpoles that were all gathered round the bait, nibbling away on it.
That's like the ultimate attractor, isn't it? Because I mean,
Oh, incredible! Yeah,
I think one of the reasons why zigs are so effective in the spring is because of tadpoles. I think this black
mm.
foam that black foam's outfished everything I've ever used zig wise. Like they might as well not put the other colours in the pack. The Fox zig aligners, they make you buy two colours you're never going to use because I'm sure there are people, the match anglers, that are changing up things up constantly. I'm sure there's maybe different
Mm.
points in the days if they're already on fish that maybe changing to red foam gets them an extra bite, but it's almost always black. Like
Yeah, you're
so,
right.
yeah, the other colours, and I think it's tadpoles.
Mm.
I think they've got to be one of the most protein-rich, nutritious sources of food for a carp that's in abundance at a certain type of year. And
Yeah,
I've seen lakes go off at that tadpole time. People have ridiculous, like 2 or 3 seasons amount of fish in a day,
yeah.
on some tricky lakes just by getting it right with the zigs. So if you've got a bait that tadpoles stick around, wow.
Mm.
I
Oh,
never know.
definitely, yeah, because it concentrates the tadpoles. And what you touched on there, I think the biggest point is it's their first big natural sort of bounty of the year coming out the winter. It's an early spring thing, the frog spawn. So it's the first glut up in the water and in the shallows. So it's that wake up call, I think, to the carp. That the sort of the leaner times of winter regarding natural food is well and truly over. And
And
it's the start of the meat feast, if you like.
yeah, I know a lot of lakes that do allow zig fishing, and lakes that I'd before zigging became really popular. Um, not many people were doing it. Quite often there was a month of the year, the first month of the year, when whatever that was, it could be February, it could be March, but whenever the fish were starting to wake up, you started seeing them again. Quite often, on lakes that allowed zigs, that first month would do zig bites, and it'd probably be 3 or 4 weeks before any fish came off the bottom. Then it'd
Yeah,
switch to the bottom. So I'm wondering if by people using the zigs, it's sort of tricking the fish into thinking that the tadpoles are here now, like they,
could
you
well
know,
be. Yeah.
it's just catching them off guard a little bit before the actual natural larder comes, which is interesting. But I've noticed, I don't know if you found this on your lakes, but lakes that don't have zigs, that don't allow zigs at all. Grenville's a good example of this that I'm thinking of. Times of year when other lakes you can only get a bite on the zig, there's always a period sort of
Mm.
late autumn going into November sort of thing where, a good example is Essex Manor, like, because that was a big zig water. It's quite a deep, small pit and adjustable zigs were essential on there. And there'd be a month of the year one in the spring and one late in the year where um, somebody would be trying the zigs or it'd slow up on the bottom. People would put the zigs on them for a month. They just get hammered on the zigs. Everybody's using the zigs. And then you can't get a bite on the zig. And it always happens that first month of the year and a month quite late on towards the winter. But a lake like Grenville, where zigs are banned, they don't get those dull, dead months where the fish don't feed in the bottom.
Right.
They fish all year round. It actually makes the fishing all round better.
That's interesting.
Yeah, every lake I've fished where zigs are banned, they don't get that month where
They
they
don't
don't
get a
feed
dead
on the
month.
bottom. Yeah, so I don't know if it's because just thinking off the top of my head now when fish are
I suppose the fish are uncaught. If these fish are getting hammered in the spring, you've
yeah
got a whole bunch of sulking fish that were swimming around up in the water. Not a lot of natural up there yet, but they've all been caught. So 10%, 20% of the population has already had a hook in its mouth. Whereas if they haven't been hammered up there, there's probably obviously a whole population coming out of the winter of fish that haven't yet been caught, and then traditional methods are going to probably work.
That's definitely part of it, and I think also as part of it is 80% of the depth is safe, like
Mm,
all the time. So if
yeah,
if they don't want to feed, or they're feeling pressured, or they're just feeling a bit vulnerable, or whatever, or on their guard, soon as they're half a meter above the bottom, they know they're safe. Like there's no
yeah,
if you're not popped up. So the rule they have in Slovenia, Croatia is no zigs, no hook baits more than 50 centimeters off the bottom. So you can use a 50
hmm,
centimeter hook bait popped up if you want, but yeah, and it's to stop zigs and to stop
yeah,
long zigs. And you can trick a big fish by popping up, half a meter off the lead. But generally, if a fish is swimming about half a meter above the bottom, they've surely learned that it's completely safe. So when they do want to get out the way, there is somewhere for them to go. So I'm also wondering if that
yeah,
makes a difference to the overall year's fishing. Is you're giving safe areas to the fish? Um,
yeah. A massive safe area if you think about it.
yeah, most of
It's the
the
top
lake.
4/5 of the lake. Yes, the whole of the lake could be safe for them if they don't, like you say, if they want to be away from it. And it's only the odd angler then who's worked out the one that shortens once you start playing your fish.
So I'm guessing being a bait maker, you don't use zigs very much, or do you?
I've no, I don't. Here's a good one. I've never actually caught a fish on one.
Wow. Okay. Okay.
I've,
Yeah.
but I've rarely put any effort into it.
You,
I've got a little pack of foam and some zigger liners and that, and it's probably cost me literally over Christmas. Flat calm, crystal clear. I was at a lake where the Canadian pondweed was just below the surface. Getting liners, no takes, climbed a tree just before I packed it up, and there's just fish cruising under the surface. And I drove home thinking that was your first opportunity where you should have had a zig out.
I read something the other day actually. Uh, Somebody, I forget who it was, like a typography or somebody. They were observing the underwater filming that whatever company it was had been doing, but saying that fish never come into a spot on the bottom. They always come,
No,
a few feet up. On literally all videos. So if they're doing that, then surely a zig on the edge of the spot, even 2, 3 foot off the
gotcha.
bottom, is going to pick your fish up. But then
Yeah,
it might give you problems with your bottom bait rods, when you get. I like catching fish over bait. Like there's no
I
two
like
ways
using
around it.
bait. I
It
like
it's
using bait. I like getting the runs on bait. I like getting a few liners, that little bit of anticipation. Um,
it's
yeah,
part
something about it.
for me. It's part of of tricking the fish as well. Like you can create feeding situations.
Mm,
I know from my little and or from my dogs, like some. There's just little triggers that get them going
mm,
mad. So they'll pick all the meat. I'd give them like meat and biscuits. They'll pick all the meat out in the mornings and just leave most of the biscuits left. And they might go back and nick a biscuit or two throughout the day. But let's say I've just cooked breakfast or something and giving them a few strands of the bacon or a bit of the egg or something. Um, they'll be sat by me sniffing and waiting. I'll give them the food and it's turned them on to eating. They might just eat that
hmm.
little mouthful and then they'll go and eat the dry biscuits then because it's like something's
Yeah,
triggered inside them that they want to eat and they would have left them biscuits there all day. So there's like I see it with my little 2 year old, that the feeding triggers. He doesn't want to feed. No, no, don't want that, don't want that. And then you get him to have one mouthful and he'll eat the bowl or whatever it is.
yeah.
So we all have triggers. And for me, zig fishing on a bit of foam with no flavor or attraction, just
Mm,
curiosity factors,
yeah.
snagging them. It's, I don't think you didn't make that fish feed. It just looked
No,
at it with its
no.
hands, which is its
Yeah,
mouth. You
yeah.
didn't learn anything. You couldn't tell your mate, who's fishing this syndicate the season after, right? This time of year they'll go into that corner there, or they follow
Mm,
this here, or they did like you've learned nothing about the habits of
yeah.
that fish by nicking it
You
on a
hit the
zig.
nail on the head there. You've learned nothing from the bite, do you?
No,
Apart from maybe what depth it happened to come at.
but
It
you've
doesn't
got the
help
bite.
you for the future. Yeah. You got the one bite and then you're back to square one again. Um, I
So
think bait makes catching them easier in the bigger picture over a whole season or a couple of years, 3 years. If you've caught them over a free bait as well, I don't mean like just a single PVA bag or a single hook bait,
mm,
because again, that's curiosity. That's a fish mouthing something. There was a chat thread popped up online since we did the last one, and the guy was going, "Oh, carp don't recognise like good ingredients. They can't tell the difference. I've caught them on fag butts. They eat dog biscuits." And I stayed out for a bit, and I thought, no, I'll have a little chat here. And I said, well, they're not feeding on fag butts. They're not eating fag butts. They're mouthing it,
yeah,
and you hook one. But something mouthing it, as you said a minute ago, the carp have only got a mouth. They haven't got hands.
yeah,
So they've got to use the mouth, haven't they, to see what it is. They eat plastic, but they can't feed on plastic.
if
It's
everybody on the
two
lake
different things.
if everybody on the lake fished fag butts for the next for
Yeah,
the next year, after the first
yeah,
week, nobody would catch a fish for the
yeah.
rest of
Nobody
the.
get anything. No, but then I take it further. I suppose the lightest bed of bait or handful of bait I'll have out there in the winter is half a kilo of 10 mils on a one rod. So quite a few baits. I sometimes crush up sort of bigger baits, but now I'm just loving tens. Always have stuck with small baits if the water allows it. And you've got a lot of food items, and you've actually disguised your hook bait in amongst them.
Yeah,
Not in a camo way, because the hook bait might be yellow and the freebies are brown. But I mean, you've got a number of items now that fish is picking up. Whereas the single hook bait, the PVA bag, the hook is such a it's a high percentage of what's there. But
mm,
suddenly when there's a load of bait out there, it's a tiny percentage. It's 1% or less of what's there.
yeah,
Fish then get confident. They're picking them off one after another, after another. Bait goes in. Sometimes hook bait goes in quickly.
mm,
I've had a few takes super quick. I had one 3 minutes this year. I actually stuck my video on just so I'd never videoed a take before. Put the phone down, turned around for the second rod, and the first one went off. So
yeah.
it couldn't have eaten all the freebies, but it was my hook bait was lost within them. So in my mind, it became safer.
So was the hook bait like a match to hatch sort of thing? Was it?
No, it was similar. It's literally what you've got. It was a
Yeah,
yellow 12 mil ester, bright yellow,
yeah,
but the freebies were a much duller brown, sort of yeah, dark brown version like I sent you.
yeah.
So, but
So
they smelt the same. So you had a smelling the same but looking different, if you know what I mean.
yeah, that this sort of it started off with the high attract hook baits years ago, sort of 20 years ago, but this I always found that a yellow pop up or a pink pop up over like a feed bait
Mm,
the pop up would nearly always go first. On on
Mm.
lakes where I could wade out and place the bait. I've done it before. I've counted, 30 baits around it and then put the hook bait on the side of the spot that I think the fish is gonna come from. Maybe it's coming out the reeds or whatever. And I've had a bite, and then when I've waded out to replace it, like there's no bait on it 'cause it's had the hook bait first. So again, playing
Mm.
devil's advocate to the zigs, that's curiosity factor again. They haven't
Well,
actually
it
eaten
is.
anything.
Yeah, but I think it's curiosity, but the take came because of confidence. Because it might have been totally different if you'd only put a single out there, just your pink one.
So
Because there was food, the table was laid.
yeah,
So the fish was attracted and they put at ease almost. Rather than coming in caution,
yeah,
because there's just the one blatant one that wasn't there a minute ago. I mean, they used to find him feed a lot of the time. And I mean, the sort of places I fish now, we don't always fish over a lot of bait, but you're baiting your spots, and then when the lines aren't in the water.
yeah.
So we're conditioning the fish to eat the bait and be confident in it. So I like to put the bulk of my baits in, like day before, 2 days before, when
I,
I'm packing up, things like that.
I don't think I mentioned it on the last podcast, but we might have spoke about it privately. But did we speak about single hook bait fishing?
I don't think so. No, I don't.
So I met a guy who's I forget his name now, but when I was fishing St. Ives, he was a contractor. He had some work in St. Ives village centre, but he was a carp angler. So obviously on these lunch breaks and stuff, he was wandering down the lake to chat to me. I ended up over a few weeks spending quite a lot of time chatting to this guy. Nice fella, seemed clued up. He'd fished a lot of the circuit waters around the sort of London Colne Valley area. He seemed to know a lot of people. So, my natural default is he's a very good angler. That was my perception. But he was stood there while I'm spodding. Some days he went, I can't get my head around this putting bait out. He said that, why would fish pick your bait up and all that? And so he fishes single hook baits only. And he'd had all the fish out of toll pits. He was on there the same time as other people that I knew, and he wasn't a bullshit in any way, but he fished totally different. But he couldn't get his head around having hundreds of freebies out
Mm,
there, and why would the fish pick up yours? And he caught just as much as probably I would have done on those same lakes, maybe more. Who knows? So, but is that the same as zig fishing? Is he obviously? I'll get into this, but I was like, what is the ultimate single hook bait then? What is it
mm.
that you're
It
so
could be
confident in?
anything. It could be anything. I did a little bit. I on a circuit water, on a popular water. I think even a man casting out a single hook bait, if it's known features, gravel pits, is it? It's not a single hook bait, is it? Because somebody else's bait was there. There's other freebies. Those fish are conditioned to the spots, so they might have cleaned the spot out, and then a new angler comes in, bangs a single out, but they unless he's got completely like off the wall areas where nobody fishes, he's fishing where others have put bait. And the fish are accustomed to bait on the bars, in the gullies, whatever it is, island margins. We've all got these sort of little maps now, and people talk about the hot spots, and they become clear spots often because of bait. And then even, it could only be a percentage of the fishermen on the water. In each swim, they'll have a favourite area. They're observed, and then somebody will come in, bang a single out, but it's on a feeding spot that's been fed. So
Yeah,
I think
so
if he had a water to himself, unfished, and only fish singles, which nobody would probably ever have, then it would be an eye opener. Are they actually that effective, or would you catch more by putting in some bait and getting
but
fish feeding?
I'm guessing if you're a good angler, which presumably he was, and we assume
Mm,
anybody thinking about this
yeah,
is going to be, then you're going to be fishing on spots you've either caught from previously, seen fish showing over, seen
that's the
fish
key
bubbling
one.
on,
That's the
yeah,
key
which
one.
means
Yeah,
they're feeding on something already. So
yeah,
even though you're putting a single out, they might be
yeah,
feed,
yeah,
your feed bait is whatever the natural thing is they're already down there feeding on, I
yeah.
guess, whether that be somebody else's bait, some natural, some bloodworm, whatever. So you're still kind of fishing
You are. You're
a
putting a
higher
hook in
draft
amongst a
over
feeding
something,
area.
aren't you?
Yeah.
Yeah, that's a
Yeah, on
good point.
observation alone, you see a fish head and shoulder. It could be the aftermath of a feeding spell on bait, like you say, it could be on naturals. But a good angler putting the bait on a fish, that's already obviously showing, if you can see it, then it's chances are these days on the waters that are commercial and fished like sort of circuit waters and that, they're eating bait for sure. Because there's
Yeah,
still a lot of people, even if they're sneaking around 3 in the morning and putting their baits out, there's bait going in, as you know, most of our lakes.
yeah. The sorry, it's completely gone. I looked at my Jaffa cakes and
Oh, ultimate! Oh,
my
yeah,
mind
oh,
jumped
yeah.
on to the next thing. So
Well,
get this.
I just suddenly, yeah, I needed to jump back. Yeah, ultimate single hook bait. There was a time where it stinks and it's horrible, but it's deadly. Have a few soaking in neat and butyric acid. It's all it
Yes.
needs.
Yeah.
It's all it needs. I've fished the same ones 2, 3 days. I was actually staying on a mate's lake. I was at the British Grand Prix, so I went up each day for qualifying, race day, and that. Left the bivvy and the rods at the lake, and then I didn't change any of the baits because I didn't want to smell more like sick at the race.
Mm.
So the baits were literally out for the nights, wound in, clipped into the rings, go to the race, come back, flicked them out, and they were just having it. The smell didn't go away, and had some good fish, really good fish on those. But I
The-
had dumped a lot of bait in when I arrived, the day before the Silverstone started, and then I'm pretty sure they ate it while I wasn't there.
yeah.
But all I did then, because I mostly wanted to sleep, was just put the 3 rods out with the 3 singles for the rest of that long weekend. But
Yeah,
yeah, neat
I
and
guess we've
clear.
all done that, like just chucked, the pub chuck sort of thing,
Mm,
singles, and quite often had a bite go. And I guess everybody will relate to the casting at showing fish, which is probably the only time I really fish singles.
yeah.
Um, is chucking at a showing fish, or back in the day, like when you could sort of cast further than you could feed.
Mm,
I have done in the past, casting extreme range to island margin, extreme range for my
yeah.
equipment or age or whatever. Casting to an island margin, I did fish, yeah, like the old sort of stiff rig style, Terry Hearn style stiff links,
Mm,
and I had plenty of fish which were definitely on singles there, but it was an island margin where they're mooching all the time. So,
yeah.
there will have been food there, naturals and whatever. And that cast at showing fish, I mean, it's normally a very efficient tactic, isn't it? If you get,
Yeah.
if
Oh,
you,
yeah. Yeah,
you know,
maybe the thud of the ledge, you've got to be a bit careful now, maybe. I've had a couple of big fish, College Reservoir, where I've put singles out on the bottom and then fish have rolled closer.
mm,
And I've literally wound as fast as I can, skip the lead to the top. I mean, we're going back 20, 25 years at least. And you skim your lead along the top, just off the back of where the bubbles were from the crash, and just letting it sink silently.
yeah,
And one of the big eight, my first of the 18 fish out of there doing that.
yeah.
It literally pulled up tight minutes later.
I remember reading Darrell Peck had the Conningbrook mirror doing exactly that, showing
Did
fish.
he? Right.
And again, because they were so spooky on there, he's cast it a long way behind it and reeled it onto a surface on
Mm,
across the surface into the rings and let it drop and had it
yeah.
however long later, 10 minutes later or something. So it's yeah, if you can cast past them, obviously, and reel it
Mm.
onto it, then that's the key. But I don't know how spooked they are by stuff landing. We've seen enough
I'm
underwater
not sure.
videos
Yeah, I
now.
don't know. It's shallow water now. Now I've had a lead thud and hit the water and a big bowway flies off.
Yeah,
So
but
whether you've actually hit the fish, maybe I don't know.
they always fly off. But I'm strong belief within 5 minutes they're back. If they
You
want you
think
to
they
be
come
there in
back?
the
Yeah.
first place, yeah, they're back. Of course, they spook. It's
Mm.
going back to the other animals. Like I think you can gauge fish's reaction. Nature tends to act the same, doesn't it? Everything in nature, regardless of the species, it's got the same motives. It's got the same survival instincts. It has to eat. And we all develop habits around that. I think, it could be going to
Yeah.
the chippy at the end of your road is your habit, but it's
I mean,
you
you're
have a
right.
habit,
Yeah.
don't you? If you were trying to hunt the guy that only eats out the chippy, you'd wait outside the chippy door and shoot him,
Yeah, of course you would. And yeah, they can't all be shit scared of leads in the water. Otherwise, the fish would spend all weekend just, wouldn't they, crapping themselves, hiding on the bottom when anglers are casting from all angles. I
Yeah,
mean, in France and that as well, I sort of took my stealth version of casting at rolling fish. It's like a little bit of bait boat stalking.
yeah,
And in England, bushwhacker stalking, literally
yeah,
leaving it out. When it's calm and you're not sure what to do with a rod, leaving it out there waiting and
yeah.
dropping it into the rings and you haven't got the boat back. And sometimes you haven't even got the bushwhacker back.
Yeah.
or into bubbles. It is phenomenal when you can put one on the head of a feeding fish silently as well.
Well, that Trent View where I've got the winter ticket, that's been fishing awful. It's done a few fish
Mm,
since before Christmas, but I don't think anywhere's been fishing great. But that is a water that bubbles. Like
does it?
before it shut down, I was on there with a few friends, and we all had a few fish, and it was mainly by observing, binoculars on the water, um, looking at the bubbling, and then dropping a
Mm.
rig, in the middle of the bubbles. And I had fish on me last morning doing that. The last time I actually caught, I blanked the last session, did a week and blanked. But it's warming up a little bit next week, so
It is, yeah.
again, I mean it's not
You've
great
had it colder
conditions.
than, yeah, you've had it colder than we have.
Yeah, but -6 last night in Blackpool, like the actual
Mm.
temperature, not the feels like,
Yeah,
and then add the cold
yeah.
wind on top of that. Yeah, I haven't been able to get the house warm for 2 days. I've just been running around the house looking for a carp cast hat to do this, and I thought I was conscious of leaving it too long. So yeah, I haven't got a hat, but I haven't got a black
Yeah.
eye either now, which is good.
When I walked in from work, I could see my breath when I got in here, and I thought, "Oh shit, I better put the heating on because otherwise it looks like it's like fog in here otherwise." But no,
This is
we're above zero at the moment.
that was the Jaffa cakes I was looking at actually. We had a long running thing because Mark was the Jaffa cake addict. Anyway, in the last few months, I've become addicted to Jaffa cakes, and it was Mark's thing. But yeah, that's what I looked at before when my mind wandered. But what I was trying to think about is this guy. Obviously, I asked him. He's the single
Mm,
hook bait guy. I asked him what he does. So he makes his own pretty sort of normal base mix, fish meal mix, I think. But he'd get a garlic capsule and wrap it.
yeah.
And he said the leakage off that, it is quite a long time. Obviously, I
Mm,
guessing when you boil the pop up, it's going to start releasing it anyway, and then you've just got a ton of garlic oozing out. So it does seem like the vast majority of fish attractors are also human enhancements, aren't they, for
yeah.
food? Your
Yeah.
black pepper oil and
Yeah. Definitely. Yeah. I mean, black pepper oil definitely is a stimulant, and it helps digestion. I think in people as well.
I
So
that's a
the
good point. Yeah.
properties cross over. So if you digest well, you eat more, and then and as an animal's point of view, you probably eat quicker because
Which
once
I,
they've digested, they're ready to feed again, aren't they?
which I guess is how that MSG craze came about in the 80s. It was the same line of thought, wasn't it? Right. Well,
Yeah.
what makes you want to eat more? That's a human sort of additive we use in food, and
Mm,
monosodium glutamate was what that was the answer at the
mm.
time. Did it make a difference in bait? Do you reckon?
Maybe not that one. There's in your ester blend, we use a sort of proven farming version of that, if you like, an animals version. And
Okay.
they put it in the drinking water to do the trials. And I mean, probably I don't know how much they spent, probably millions of euros on trials. And they put these enhancers in drinking water of certain animals in a row in pens and left it out of others. And the ones with the stuff in ate more.
Right. Is it is
Um,
it is it a
and
secret ingredient, this one?
Not really. No, it's a powder. Um, the actual powder, we do those pop-ups with the dust-in powder on the website, where there's a little
Okay.
pot of the powder as well.
Yeah.
Uh, that's the stuff.
That is the powder,
Um,
is it?
that is the powder. Yeah, it's in your Ester Blend B base mix.
Beautiful.
There's a few versions of it. We managed to get a creamy version, which goes in the smell.
Yeah.
And then that one, everyone loves the smell of that. It's like vanilla, caramel. So that always got used more than the one that has like a slightly fruity undertone. So that's why I wanted to build something around the underused one. I know there have been other baits in Britain, there probably still are, that use the creamier one, but there's not a production bait I've come across that has this particular fruit. Let's say animal, lamb, MSG, call it, not lamb
Okay.
flavored, for lambs and pigs. So yeah, so we built a fruity sort of seed mix around that pure powder,
Hmm.
and yeah, it's in those little pots.
I
I've
remember
slapped myself on the wrist because I've not sent you a pot of it neat yet, but I will do that. I'll stick that in the post.
Oh, perfect. It does make a difference sometimes, those powders. I remember
Mm,
fishing. Kevin Nash's Church Lake, and there was a guy called Keith Jones. Remember Keith Jones? Used to do a bit in the
Rings a bell,
magazines.
yeah.
Um,
Yeah.
he was a very deep thinking angler, especially with bait and stuff. And anyway, we were, I think Basie was on there as well. There was Gary, there was Keith, and there was me. And at that time, got limited opportunities to fish there. And it was a not normal water, as far as the fish
Mm,
size and just the enjoyment of fishing it. But it's one of them that you put in 150% effort because
mm,
you don't know when you might get a chance to fish it again, and it's got some very special fish in it. Well, it certainly did then. It was not normal the amount of 50s it had in it compared to the rest of the country put together.
yeah.
It was. Anyway, we were all struggling a bit. First sort of 36 hours out of maybe 72 hours. I don't think any of us had caught. And I think it was Basie and Keith that came up with. They were soaking. We had a load of pellet and was soaking the pellet in GLM powder,
Hmm.
and that made the difference. Like we
Mm.
soaked them overnight.
What then coated a minute dry after sort of thing.
Yeah, coated them in it,
Yeah,
let it dry, and then
yeah,
and put it out. We all ended up catching it. Really kicked the sort of session off. But sometimes just a tweak like that. I mean, what other
yeah.
additives out there? Because I know a lot got there was a lot of things people used to use that you now can't
Yeah,
use because of EU and stuff like that, isn't there? Or they've been deemed
yeah.
as
New Year's Eve, I coated all my freebies. So yeah, so that other powder I was just on about, the fruity one. The reason it stood out to us wasn't it was nothing. The only bit that really sort of rung a bell and made me go on it is because they put it in the drinking water.
yeah.
That was the key part
So it
of the
must be soluble.
paper I was reading. Yeah. So it wasn't the fact they had to eat, the animals didn't have to eat a pellet or a food with it in for it to suddenly work. It worked and then made them feed. And it was like a research paper I was reading, and then I got a brochure from the agricultural company, and that was the bit I thought, well, shit. So it's in the water, and it's that stimulated secondary feeding. So we obviously incorporate it in a bait because you get a slow leakage. But I realised that a product like that wants to be in direct contact with the water in your swim. And yeah, on powders, just before Christmas, I managed to get 20 kilo of ox liver from my local butcher down in Weybridge.
Yeah.
And it was two livers. I'll put a photo up. It's like these bloody great, sort of 2 foot wide slabs of liver. So we've got dehumidifiers, and so I got them to play around with the hydrolysates and make a liquid liver. But I
Yeah.
dried a load out into strips, so it looked like a jerky. Put it through the powder blender and just made basically neat, pure, uncooked liver powder.
Wow.
So New Year's Eve, oh yeah, I went fishing New Year's Eve. So I wanted something a bit different. So it was still banana boilies, but I just wanted try something else. So I put some liquid liver with some boiling water, poured it over
Mm.
the 10 mil, shook them around, chucked in a big handful of liver powder, and it sort of crusted on them. And I was walking around the far margin, and as I was coming back, I just saw a fish waddling along. So I left it a couple of hours, I suppose. It was just below the surface in clear water. That was 8 in the morning. 10 o'clock, I put a rig right over with a big handful of these boilies on it, all tens. 11 o'clock, 27 pounder, New Year's Eve.
Wow.
And I thought, yeah, that were the other rods, nothing else. It was just that sort of observation helped that I saw a fish in the far margin,
Mm.
probably in 3 foot of water. It's not a deep lake, it's only about 9 foot deep. But
Yeah.
he was right up on the shelf, just hugging, just about to come round the corner from under the trees and along the dam wall. And whether I caught that particular fish, but it was the right sort of size. But yeah, that powder leak off, if you like, and crumbs
Mm.
of liver, I thought that was quite good. So that was just literally pure, nothing but liver
Do you
made
think
into a fine flour. That was good.
do you think these sort of things are uh, more apparent in the winter when fish are feeding less, the water's clearer, there's less natural? Do you think that these little sort of tricks make the difference?
Um, yeah, I think probably other if you've got nuisance fish and they're quieter, it gets through to the carp a bit better.
Right.
A carp that's is sort of a bit indifferent whether it wants to eat or feed. I think you could spark an interest and suddenly just trigger it that it wants to, it tastes food. All its sort of receptors get a little ping.
Yeah.
And I think that is enough. If they're active, obviously, if you see it move, if it's lying sat on the bottom, covered in leeches, I wouldn't say it'll suddenly wake up, go bursting around in circles and eat a load of bait.
Mm.
But I think it can be, yeah, it can be an edge. I've got a feeling if you go super, super sort of highly attractive, my approach wouldn't work on a lot of these lakes, sort of spring, summer when the bream wake up,
Yeah.
because anything that works on the cups, anything bream, big rudd, roach, they're all going to nail you so quick. So sometimes you need to rein it back a little bit.
Yeah.
Soft baits, as we know, are brilliant, but there's times where you physically want to make sure that the carp gets something. So you do have to have bigger baits and harder baits out there, as freebies. I mean,
Yeah.
but even silvers help. Silvers eating and crunching and making noise, and bits of the boilies flying out the gills. The smell of our bait is probably improved once another fish has crapped it out. The solubles are coming out. It's partially digested, which is another sort of holy grail, isn't it?
Mm.
Pre-digested proteins. I think most things are eaten twice or more, not just particles. Um,
Yeah.
Dynamite
I've
days,
always,
I was chatting with Jim Shelley once back in the Dynamite days, and he was observing, I don't know if it was Norfolk, I don't know where it was, but it was his winter water, and he had like a bush hanging over a tree. You could watch them, and he said in the winter there was a bunch of carp, where they all ball up together.
yeah.
But he said they would break off and feed somewhere else, and then they'd return to the sort of holding area, if you like.
Yeah.
And I think he got me to do something. He wanted very pale pink
Mm.
boilies. So I don't know if the colour made a difference, but he wanted some pale pink ones. And he said he'd literally watched fish come back into the holding group and crap, and a little cloud of like fish crap and that would come floating out in amongst them back in the holding area.
Yeah.
He reckoned that triggered fish then that would break off. He was
And
convinced,
go and look for it.
yeah, go and look for food. And it was, yeah, one fish crapping triggered another fish to go off and find some food.
Wonder if you
And
could
that, I thought, God, yeah, you can actually introduce fish to your bait and get established baits and create a form of recognition. It doesn't, it's knowing where they want to eat, but being confident enough that chances are your bait is spreading around the lake. It's getting crapped out in snags and holding areas, weed beds, things like that.
a little technique we'd do every now and again in the 80s, late 80s maybe, we'd get a sack of tiger nuts and used to use a lot then. I know people have done the same thing with peanuts, and one of them safe sort of bushes where the fish hold up, maybe it's inaccessible, but you could always watch them in there or whatever. That's where you'd throw the sack of tiger nuts,
Mm,
and then you'd catch them all around the lake crapping the tiger nuts out.
yes.
They'd
Yeah.
spread them out
That's
for you.
probably the one single look bait that I would fish with confidence
Yeah.
is a tiger,
for that
because
for that reason.
if anyone's on tigers, they're dotted around and little piles of crushed.
Yeah.
When we first sort of created the salted PVA friendly type stuff, the one that got me the most excited, I don't think we'd ever launched, not as me, as other companies, and it was a chopped up one, tube tigers, if you like.
Yeah.
And because that, as a solid bag, it's got to be the most natural presentation for a carp that wants to re-eat something that another carp's crapped out.
So you did used to get the dynamite crushed tigers. They always used to do a crushed
Yes,
tiger.
yeah,
I
did
think.
them in the jars, yeah,
Yeah.
yeah.
So
But
so did they melt PVA bags or
yeah, yeah. But all of those were like you cook at home, so
yeah.
they were done in an autoclave. So it was the water, the particles sealed,
Yeah.
hot, like a hot steam bath, if you like, pressure cooker.
Yeah.
So inside is pasteurized. So there's no preservatives. Nothing goes off. When you open them, air bacteria starts to work on it. So it's as if you just opened it, and it was home cooked. So that was a water-based product.
Got
I mean, back then people hadn't really sussed when all the jarred water particles came out. They hadn't really sussed that you could drain them and just sort of cover them in salt, and that was
yeah.
enough to stop the PVA sort of melting.
I
But
was,
these
I was
days, you've got your PVA, you've got your shelf life particles now, which might be in bags, pouches. They can be in jars. They've had like a bit of glycol as well as some salt in. Those can be wet and put in a PVA bag, and they won't melt it.
so have they got preservatives in then these sort of shelf life
Yeah,
ones?
shelf life particles will have a preservative. Or some companies might want to call it a stabilizer if it's not, if they don't want to call it a preservative or an extender. But anything that extends it more than its natural life is a preservative, regardless of
Yeah.
what it happens to be.
Yeah, by
But
definition.
yeah,
Yeah, I
yeah,
mean,
yeah.
I always thought the way to do it was to just drain it and then put oil in. You know,
Oil's one way, but salt's better. But
is it right?
also, basically, your PVA melts with with normal water, H2O. So if you change the water to something that's not pure water, then the PVA won't melt, or it'll melt a lot slower.
I
So
remember
obviously,
I remember
yeah,
basically
sorry, again.
telling me it needs to be a percentage of water. So I forget what it was now, but I'm sure it was like the water content could be higher than what you would think.
Oh yeah, yeah. To if you're going to produce your particle as well, you need water as well.
Hmm.
You could take an ordinary cooked particle that you've done yourself, one that would go off, and you could salt that or oil it or PG,
Hmm.
glycols, a lot of the glugs,
Yeah.
glycerine-based glugs. You could coat them in that and then put them in the bag, and
So
you won't melt the PVA.
how much salt would you be putting in then if you had the equivalent every
4%. If you were making a solution up, yeah,
yeah.
4 to 5% solution. But if
And
I had
that
a
would stop PVA melting.
yeah,
So
yeah.
if you took a
That
glass
will
of
slow
glass,
it. That will. When it goes all stretchy, a solid bag it'll go a bit baggy and stretchy. The mesh is far more durable. You don't need anywhere near as much salt for the mesh.
so
But if
if
you had a kilo,
that's
yeah,
what
go
I
on.
was going to ask, if you had a glass of
Mm,
water and then half filled it
yeah,
with salt, so
yeah.
it's
Well, yeah,
50%.
you wouldn't be able to dissolve that much. If you reach saturation, you get your boiling water. You can put salt in, and I don't know where saturation point is. It's about 11 or 12%, I think. The water can't take on any more salt after that. It might be a fraction higher, but there is a limit where the salt won't dissolve. It'll just sit at the bottom. So
Okay,
then you've saturated the water. That won't melt PVA.
so let's say you did it at 10% sort of ratio, you
Mm.
could pour that in PVA and it wouldn't instantly melt it.
Yeah.
Wow, I
Or
didn't know that.
you can make a wet ground bait, a stick mix, and put it it down a mesh. Push it down with a plunger, and it
How how how,
won't melt the netting.
how did I not know that?
So, but yeah, my normal approach, if I want to do just a couple of bags now, drained off hemp, say kilo of hemp, handful of salt, shake it all over it, just so you see it's glistening. Bung it straight in the PVA.
Wow.
But what do we do? Yeah, 3 kilos. Yeah, it doesn't need a lot. I was just about to say, 2 kilo pouches that we produce, they'll have 200 gram in. So
Yeah.
yeah, 10%.
Wow.
And that straight out the bag won't melt the PVA. But
Wow.
you can make a watery flavor solution and then boilie crumb. You could make a paste. You could make it as like a moist ground bait.
Hmm.
And if you wanted to compact that into a stick, then it'll go out there. But you don't want to make too many of them up too soon because oil, especially if you do mesh sticks and make loads of them, you can waterproof the PVA so well it won't melt.
I've definitely done
Um,
that.
yeah, if you wound one in,
I've spent years only fishing those sticks. So I've spoke about this before in the Carpcast when I did a few years in a row where I was only fishing lakes you could boat on. So I got so used to perfect presentation. Didn't cast for three seasons probably. Everything's dropped from a boat. Anyway, you get used to it being perfect, so your mind's fully at rest when you're sat in the bivvy. Then when I went back to fishing lakes where I had to cast again, I couldn't settle. But like my mind wouldn't relax. It was like, oh, is it presented? What if this? What if that?
yeah.
Anyway, I conquered that fear by it was around the time the Corda brought out the long chuck funnel web. So a lot of lakes that I fished, you were fishing more than 80 yards, up to sort of 110.
Mm.
And I found with the long chuck, I could still reach those longer spots. So I'd used the next size up, the one that's about the width of a 15 mil boilie. It's probably 14,
Hmm.
15 mil. I used that. But what I also found using that method was couple of times I was fishing to far margins, one of the lakes that I used to fish, and you could go around and bait up. And obviously, if you cast it a bit long and it ended up in the shallow water on the shelf, you saw the rig presented and stuff after you've cast it 100 yards, sort of thing. Anyway, I remember discussing years ago with a couple of friends I was fishing with, like, what is the perfect if you could hand place your rig, like what's the perfect way to place it. And I came up with a semicircle, like a U, a letter U for your hook link. It's got to be the perfect way because then a fish sucks it from
Mm.
any direction. It can get it in its mouth, even if it's
Got
sucked
slack,
from,
yeah.
yeah, it's got
Yeah.
slack, even if it's sucked from a few inches away. Where, anyway, I was like, how can I actually present a rig casting like that, in a U shape? Anyway, turns out, which I didn't know, once I started fishing this method, like Snowman's was my sort of go-to at the time, a little 10 mil pop up behind a sort of 12 to 15 mil bait, and then threading a stick down the hook link. Once I was fishing like that, my catch rate was as good as it's ever been for quite a lot of seasons. I fished like that for over 10 years, I would say. I'd never cast out without a stick. And then um, this one time I'd cast that far margin, gone round to bait up, looked at it, and it was the stick had melted and it was in the U shape. So what I found happened when you sink it on a tight line, it
Yeah.
falls back on itself and then to the
Yeah.
side
Yeah.
because it's a stick and it ends up in that actual U shape. And I'm wondering if that's why
That
my,
was
my
your,
catch rate was as good as it's ever been because you guaranteed it wasn't tangled. It could land in light weed, it'd be fine. And it was also it had slack from any angle. Anyway, I obviously did a lot of casting and looking then to make sure it wasn't a fluke. And every time you cast out, as long as you landed on a tight line, felt it down, it'd obviously go down slower as well.
mm,
Which I think just helps with everything, not sort of landing in a clump.
yeah.
And it was perfect every time. It's like the ultimate presentation.
Shows that observation in it, being able to see what's the aftermath. Yeah, on my stick thing, the first time I had this bucket, it was back in the sauce days actually, and I had like a bucket, a liquid sauce, and I thought, right, I'm going to make a load of sticks up, chuck them in the sauce. So I got this bucket there. They look like floating turds, really, bobbing around in it. And I'm on Margot, first years ago. So I've got three of them, and I haven't threaded them on 'cause I'm boating out. So I just hooked them on. So I've got a stick, rig, hooked it on. Out they've gone. Oh, the amount of bit like this all the time. We're like, fucking, we're getting liners here. Then every time it ripped off, it was a sturgeon.
Yeah.
And then the sticks weren't melting. The liquid sauce did. It
Well,
totally waterproofed them. So the
yes.
carp were trying to eat the stick, and it was too big. And the only thing that would get the whole bloody thing in the mouth was sturgeon. And it's like recaught the same 43 times. I think we had a 72, I had a 56. And it was
Wow.
only when we ditched it and thought, right, forget this, or made them smaller. But yeah, that was my first thing about how you can sort of over PVA friendly something.
I
Um,
I saw something interesting about sturgeon the other day, actually. I didn't realize they were so prevalent in UK rivers sort of hundreds of years ago and very big. So do you know the British record sturgeon? Do you know what it is?
no, not a
So
clue.
it was caught in late 1700s from I forget which river it was now. Um, and it was 170 something pound.
Whoa,
There was fish living that
bloody
big in our
hell.
rivers. But this is kind of just pre-industrialization. So
Yeah,
when we started polluting the rivers, but
when it was clean, they were there. Yeah.
yeah,
Wow.
they are clean water fish as well, aren't they, sturgeon? I
Mm,
think.
yes. Oh, yeah.
So
Yeah.
yeah, it blew my mind to think you could have gone fishing 300 years ago to get the family some dinner in the river.
100 pluses and a big bucket of caviar. Yeah.
Yeah,
No, when you were just describing about your U shape,
mm,
my head was going then because it's interesting that you said by casting and sinking it did it. And
yeah,
I was just thinking, God, yeah, normally hooks at the bottom of a stick, in it? We slide it down, hook length straight.
yeah,
I just suddenly thought then, God, if you pulled the hook length out the bottom, bent it back up and hooked it in,
yeah,
you
yeah,
you could create that little U, couldn't you? And that bit of slack.
yeah. Yeah, but just
So,
sinking on the tight line,
but
the
sinking
way it
on the
comes
tight
down, it
line
comes and
gave you
falls
the
back on itself.
yeah. So that's
Yeah,
the interesting bit because I think perception, without being able to see it, everybody thinks a stick is in a perfect straight line, don't they, in front of their lead with a hook length perfectly straight.
yeah,
But the
but
fact you
doesn't
saw it, no, the fact you
it
saw it
falls
bent
backwards
backwards,
every time. Like
that is
it
excellent.
falls
Yeah.
backwards. It must be because it's obviously going down forwards, isn't it? It's going down
Yes.
45
Yeah.
degree
Yeah. Oh, of
forwards.
course it's
So it's always going
yes.
to fall on its back. Always.
Yeah,
It's
it's following. In effect, it's following the lead, isn't it?
yeah,
The
it,
lead's
it
the leading thing, and it's
exactly.
trailing. So yeah, so she is. She's not going to suddenly fling forward, is it?
No, and
Even if you hit a clip, yeah, if you hit the clip,
even
it'll
if you
fling
sink it
forward in the
on
air. But yeah,
Yeah, even if you just sink it, as long as you hit the clip before the water, it always fell
Mm.
backwards. And it's
Ah, good
I
point.
tried it. I tried undoing the clip and just letting it fall vertically.
Mm.
It was always the same. So, and probably my most efficient years, I would say, fishing. I was super
Mm.
confident with that anywhere. I mean, it's probably a good time to go back to that sort of style. Obviously,
No
I
one's
didn't use
doing it,
pop up.
are
No, I didn't use pop-ups for years. And then obviously there was this craze. I like some of the pop-ups that I use, some of the companies
they? Mm.
I've bought them off that, like that only do pop-ups, they sort of
Yeah.
high-end expensive ones. So there's a couple of them that I use. They do seem to outfish other pop-ups,
Mm.
from the main bait companies. Um, and you obviously get into pop-up rigs. You're not using sticks anymore when you're using a pop-up. So I just kind of changed my style of fishing. But with the boom of the spinner rig and the Ronnie rig,
Mm.
everybody's now using pop-ups. So it's probably a really good time for me to go back to
Yeah.
what's been my most efficient presentation forever.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
yeah,
Another one just coming to me, Ed, about observing after you've cast it out. This was another sort of, luckily, what I thought was a great rig, and it turned out in my situation to be absolute load of crap. I was sort of it's sauce days again, pre-sauce, and so Terry's boom stiff rig.
yeah,
So boom section, lovely little hinge, little pop up. So absolutely fine. I'm at a lake. I should, when you get a feeling you should be getting more than you're getting.
yeah,
So I whacked them over, and I thought, right, I'm gonna go over and have a look. And it's Silty Estate Lake in Devon. I've gone around, found it, sticking straight up because the lead's punched into the silt.
yeah,
So there wasn't enough any flexibility. So you ended up with a sort of the boom section coming up out of the mud like this, with the pop up section then like that,
yeah,
with the sort of the counterbalance just bobbing it all around up here, just with thick mono and a bait sort of inches and inches up with a swivel and a big blob of putty
yeah.
right in the sort of eyes of the carp. And
I've
that was
always
one where you thought, nah,
I've always been worried about that. I used that stiff boom a lot for a lot of years, but I always used a coated hook link for the boom section.
yeah,
And I'd always use it sort of longer, like as I see a lot of people use it. They're kind of even lengths, aren't they? The boom and the pop-up
yeah,
bit. I would always use it the length of a normal hook link,
hmm,
sort of 8 inch, 9 inch, 10 inch, and then the pop-up section. But that's become a lot more common now. Daryl uses like the reverse sort of uh what would you call it? Reverse combi, I guess, where you
yeah.
have the
I'm
sort of
using boom
stiff
at the
bit,
hook end. Yeah,
yeah, and then a supple bit.
yeah, I've got
Um,
about 5 centimeters of some sort of stiff 25-pound boom filament with the hook.
yeah.
And then I'm either using a dark matter heavy braid,
Mm,
uncoated,
yeah.
or like a super silk, a really soft, supple braid. If it's going out with a bait boat or the spoons, definitely with a bushwhacker, then I'll use the most supple braid I can for the boom section. And that way, I think it's increased the direction that your rig's going to work.
So it's the
If you've got
same thing
stiff
as the U,
boom,
isn't it?
yeah,
Yeah.
it
It's
is. It's the fish can come in. Yeah, it's like you. They could come from behind it, beside it, and the stiff bit will go swinging around whichever way because it's not
mm.
not held back by stiff mono.
I used to fish like that in the 90s when silkworm was the latest. It was Christum, wasn't it? I think, and
Yeah,
the
yeah.
first one. And I would do that. I'd use sort of a 6 inch uh section and a pop up, but quite a heavy weight on the pop up, so that
Mm,
when it sunk, it just all went down in a crumpled pile. So it was right next to the lead, and
mm.
I don't think the lead bothers the carp, to be
No.
honest, because I think a lot of rigs the hook bait sat right next to the lead anyway.
Yeah.
I think most of the takes you have, they've picked your hook bait up from next to the lead. But yeah, again, same thing. It could be sucked from any angle because I think
Mm,
obviously location's the most important thing in catching fish if they're not where you're fishing. But anyone who does 48 hours a week, quite often there's a window of opportunity where fish come
yeah.
across you, even if you weren't on the fish when you set up, or you're not a lot watcher, a looker, or you've just had
Mm.
to go into any old swim because the
Yeah.
lake's
Whatever
busy
swim
or
you can
whatever.
take. Yeah.
Then I think at some point you'd usually get a chance, especially in a 3 night session, like something will come across you. So I think then baiting situation, um, the environment you're making to feed has got to be suitable for the current time and attractive enough for them to
Yeah.
feed. And presentation, I think there is that baiting situation and presentation are as important as each other, I think,
Yeah,
because, if your presentation's right and you only get a minimal chance or like one or two chance, you need a higher conversion rate. So you don't want, if the fish has come in from, you see it on a lot of these underwater videos, the fish comes in from the end of the rig. Quite often it gets
yeah,
away with it. It looks like it's gone in its mouth and it swims off and the hook pulls out. Like it does seem to be the worst angle for a fish to
it does, doesn't
approach
it? Yeah.
any rig, yeah, from the
Some of them
underwater.
as well, when they pick up and move towards the lead, they've obviously felt it, spat it out. The lead hasn't had any sort of any
Yeah,
help, has it, in putting the hook home?
exactly. So, all these sort of things, they just thinking about your presentation. I mean, the amount of people I see that don't feel the lead down,
Mm,
they're not hitting clips. Now, I've seen a couple of good anglers that I know catch a lot of fish and I fish near them and they've caught when I haven't caught. So, they're clearly good. But then they
mm,
fish in a style that I think, you're just whacking it out. You're not feeling the lead down. How do you know if you're in weed? How do you know like what it felt like? Is that the
yeah,
good bit? If you do get a bite, how do you know that bit's better than the bit 2 foot to the right of it? Or if you don't get a bite, more importantly, because you didn't feel it, that could have been slightly deeper there, or that could have, you can feel a foot and a half to 2 foot difference, which is a carp hold. Yeah, you can feel that. If you can have 50 casts on the spot and you know the swim and you cast on it regularly, and all of a sudden it just takes a bit longer with, to go down, it's gone down
yeah.
a bit further. They're your hot spots, aren't they? Normally, they're the sort of places you're looking
They're,
for.
they're one man's hotspot. It's like I've got a mate who will wind in if he hasn't felt a great big donk. He
Yeah.
wants that cleaned off bit of bottom. But other people, and maybe I'm in the sort of other people camp, think that spot's done. You know,
Yeah.
that's finished. It's too blatant. If it was in the edge, it would be massive and look like a runway of yellow gravel sort of thing. And the fish were wary of it. So you almost want that softer landing, the light covering of silt. But
There's def
luckily, it shows that everybody's got their own favourite, and we all catch fish when our name's on it.
there's definitely spots where I fish where you don't get a bite in the hard. You've got to land in the
Mm,
soft, but that
yeah.
could also be certain times of year. But I remember having the same conversation with Darryl. We fished quite a lot of lakes at the same time together, in his early career when he was 17, 18, whatever,
Mm,
18, 19 maybe. When he started on Yateley and then a couple of lakes we fished together. Anyway, we had these conversations a lot and I've seen him say it recently, and I can't disagree. That mega donk you get where you go, that's the one. I ain't
mm.
moving that rod. That's the one that goes with the big one on it. Like
Yeah.
it always goes when you get that just donk of life we call it.
If
It's
it's
just like
if it's different to every other donk, then I can see that. But I think back to how we fished years ago. We used to drag back, didn't we? Cast
exactly.
out. I did.
Mm.
Cast out as far as you could, any of the reservoirs down here,
And then pull
and the
back.
gravel pits and farlows. And we pulled back, pulled back. We didn't give a monkeys, but the hooks were probably half blunt, so you didn't worry, you couldn't bend them anymore. And you pull back till something tapped or slid smooth, and you go
Yeah,
dunk, dunk, dunk. And if it felt really good, there's times where you'd leave it
yeah.
or you'd buzz it in before clipping up even, and then
I've
you'd
seen.
whack it out to the vicinity, wouldn't you? Then you'd pull it a little bit and go, boom, boom, there it is, and you'd be dragging it back along the bottom until you found your spots, put the rods down, hang the bobbins on, full of confidence that all of them felt nice while you were dragging,
I've
and
seen Gary
caught loads
Bates
of
do
fish.
that. I've seen
Have
Gary do it
you?
on
Yeah.
Fendraiton. Yeah, he did. If the rods have been out for a while, nothing's happened. You pick them all up and go, shh, just and then put them down again, and and sometimes get a bite. But it's a lot more
Yeah.
weed in lakes these days, isn't there? I think that's
There
one of
is
the.
more weed. Yeah, we didn't have to. I love my favourite spots. I think is if I can find a sheer wall of weed and I can
Yeah,
go over it,
yeah,
and
always.
then you slide a bit, don't you? And then you can literally feel the lead just start to lock up a bit. Then I tend to redo it, knowing that I'm going to stop now, and you've hopefully you've pulled that lead into the edge of that weed. But then I'll
Yeah,
still catapult or spom or boat or pole freebies in the weed as well.
of course. Yeah, yeah.
Yeah, all over the place.
Yeah, if I find a spot like that, I do exactly that. I pull the marker up to the back of it just so it locks up in it.
Mm,
The furthest I can pull it in and still get the marker to pop up, and then
yeah.
I'll have a few casts behind the marker, coming as close to the marker as I can get, where I get the hard bump and not in the weed. So, and it's surprising sometimes how close you have to get land behind the marker to actually
Mm.
know that you're right on that wall of the base of
Yeah.
the weed, or sometimes steep bars. I do the same, like when gravel pits that I fish. There was a spot on a lake up north called the Wire in the bench swim. It's like a lot of people didn't know it was there because it was a weird distance from the island. It was just a bit too far off the island where you would leave it. You'd want to be close to the
Mm.
island. But if you actually came back another sort of 10 yards, so somewhere where you wouldn't naturally fish, there was a really steep bar. And I forget it had a name, and I named it. But a lot of people fish that swim a lot and didn't know it was there. Had obviously no bait, boat water, and
Mm.
there'd have been no reason to pop anything up. You'd have found it by luck, which is probably what I did. But same thing. I'd pull the marker up. It was sort of fine gravel. No, it was firm silt at the back of it, and uh, yeah, because if you went a bit longer, it was soft silt, and then up to the island where it hardened. So there was like a channel of soft silt, and then got hard silt,
Yeah.
and the base of this very steep bar. It was really steep. If you landed anything on top, it fell down the back. But I found there it was a banker spot as long as you got super tight to the actual crease of
To the
the
base. Yeah.
yeah. And if you were 2 foot behind it, you'd still get a bite, but it'd take longer. So if
Yeah.
you had three rods over it, the first one went was always the one that was the tightest
Yeah. Oh,
to
right,
it.
like you say, on that crease, isn't it? That's where they're following with
Yeah,
the
and
edge to their side, their shoulder.
yeah.
It
So
is the natural progression, I think. And if they find food, it's that they spread from that point, don't they?
this bar, the base of it's probably about 80 yards out, probably, I don't know, 11, 12 foot deep. So it could take a few casts to get in the crease sometimes. And
Mm.
you'd have to land in about, I think it was 11, 12 foot of water, something like that. You'd have to land about 2 to 3 foot behind the marker. If you landed on the marker, you'd feel the rocks on the bar.
Yeah.
But it was really good for testing because you knew if you were too short because it was rock, and if
Yeah.
it was too long, it was soft,
It was
and
short. Yeah.
just had this firm bit at the base. Yeah, but it didn't half make a difference. And I don't know if people fine tune spots as much, the spot within the spot within the spot, and you end up catching
No.
more off them sort of spots because
Mm.
you get to know exactly what you're looking for within the spot, don't you? You know
Yeah.
that it goes quicker if it's worth having 50
Yeah.
casts, to get it right.
Yeah.
Um,
I never sort of stop and say, right, I've got my three spots now, or I've got my spot, I'm happy with it. I like new water, say, or a new swim, try and get a rod, try and get a take, don't we? And
yeah,
that's your starting point then. And then on a regular water, I'll end up with rods in a swim on three spots I've had takes. And they
yeah,
could be close together, but then one of them still is the worst one.
yeah,
But instead of so many people, and there's quite a few of them, they'll sit and they'll fish a whole season in
mm,
those swims on those spots.
yeah,
I mean, a couple of people local that I have a smile at because it's all pre-programmed in the bait boat, and sun or rain, winter or summer, same spots out the same swims, same drops,
mm,
and same blanks quite often because that area they could be just 6 foot away. They could have overdone that little spot. They might not have even been on the hot spot in the swim. They could have been, like you say, on the very edge of it. I think you have to never just sit back complacent and go, that's it now, they're all perfect. Because we're hooking fish on them, aren't we? So we're changing the confidence in the spots as well.
on every syndicate lake that there's a guy that's mastered one swim, and
Yeah,
he can have five fish and you can go in straight after it, and because you're not fishing exactly how he does on the spots, like you don't get the results that he has. You might do 3 4 days in it, you leave, he goes in and catches straight away again. I've had it where
yeah.
I've been that
I've
guy.
seen that. Yeah, yeah, I've
Yeah, I've
seen
had it
that.
when
Yeah.
I'm that guy. I know the spots. I fine tuned it, and that is
Mm,
how I used to fish. What you just described. You get your first bite out of a swim. That's one spot. Then you try and find a
mm,
second spot, and then you try and find a third spot. So you've got three banker
yeah,
spots. Each
yeah.
time, and then if one of them's not as good as the other two, you start
Mm.
looking for
Start hunting again. Yeah.
yeah
And that's what keep yeah, because like I say they do change. Last winter I had a really good spot that was giving me everything. A big cave under a tree. By the end of it, God, they were so paranoid of it. It was polished and shining and gleaming. 9 foot of water. So I think 16 out of 28 fish came from the one bit under this bush.
wow
Went back onto it this winter. Didn't fish it spring, summer, early autumn. Went back, dumped 10 kilo bait in there before I went fishing. Six fish off the spot again, but six this time. That's it. It's done.
Dried up, yeah.
Yeah, dried up 3 times quicker this year.
Were any of the six the A team, would you say, or not?
Yeah, one was a repeat, same 24 times.
Got you.
Twice
It's,
last year, twice this year.
I was
Um,
wondering if it's the bigger, older, more experienced fish that learn quicker than the others about a spot.
yeah, I think also they all communicate with each other. They can pick up a vibe, whether it's a pheromone, a fear pheromone, caution pheromone. I don't know what it is, but I think there's uncaught fish that suddenly spook off the spots. Because if in theory they couldn't learn from each other, we should be able to catch all the fish that want to be under that bush.
Yeah.
It should increase my chance of catching one I've not had before, rather than the spot dying completely. And I think it's that. Well, we have seen it. There was a well-known, some fish were feeding in the margin of one of our clay pits here, and a particularly large and very rarely caught common literally came in, boshed, crashed, and moved out. The lines were in the water,
Mm.
and it just moved out and took the feeding fish with it.
Wow.
And it was just nuts. This fish just proved right up. Um, Ashley Pool, that was another one for observation. I first visit there, I've crawled under a tree and I can see three fish, three mirrors. I've put handfuls of 10 mils in, no lines, just 10 mil boilies. They're having it. First day, Ashley Pool, these fish are eating boilies, and I'm watching them in like the famous tap water, clear water, picking up boilies one after another. Tails are curling, tails out the water like this. Put some more in, absolutely fine. They've drifted off, and I've crawled under with a rod, leg core, and it's so close. The leg core is coming up into my tip ring,
Mm.
loop down and along the bottom. Another handful of 10 mils boilies in. The fish have come along the line, and the first mirror, honestly, this is God's honest, came all the way to the margin, to my rod tip. The leg cores drooped down. It turned around. I thought, shit, it's going to spook. The leg core was over its pelvic. It swam back along the line with the leg core running over its pelvic like
Yeah.
this, and it's lifting the leg core. And I was like, why ain't it spooked? I thought it got to the lead. I thought, what's going to happen now? It shrugged it off like that. It waddled out. These fish had been troughing. The
Mm.
other two mirrors followed it. Those 10, 12 boilies were there 12, 14 hours later at dawn the next day. They never even came back once the rig was out.
Wow.
And it literally just swam to my rod tip, picked the line up, rubbed the line all along its body, shrugged it off like that, and drifted away.
Mm.
That's like, it's mental.
I was thinking then we touched on it last time with the liquids pouring the ice cream into water
Mm,
that triggered the
yeah,
feeding response. And what you said earlier about the fish, well, you just gave an example of them stopping the other fish from feeding, but
mm,
but one fish turning the other fish on to feed.
yes,
So
yeah.
finding a safe area like a bush or something and pouring some stimulant in, like
Oh,
that
God, yeah.
ice cream mix, then if that triggers all the fish into a reaction, then
Make,
they're going to go looking for food because there wasn't any food there. It was just
yeah.
signal. Um,
Make a smoothie out of the boilies. Whiz
oh
them up
yeah,
with some water and some milk and stuff. Crush the boilie as well.
yeah.
Big lug in it. Make a liter of like milkshake consistency boilie mix,
I
and
te-
spoon it in or spot it in or pour it in.
I'm going when I go to Trent View. I may well go next week, but I always find after a really cold stint when it first warms up, it takes a while. It takes a week, so I don't know if I'm better
Does it?
waiting
Mm.
the week after. But I haven't been fishing for a few weeks. I need to go, so maybe I'll just go anyway. But now I've got this banana ester blend. Maybe grind some of
Yeah,
that up
I would grind some up,
with
but get boiling
Nesquik.
water on it. Yeah, as well. But use boiling water and grind it up,
Yeah,
whiz it up in in a blender, and get it so it's all the solubles will be out of it then, and you'll have created a cracked out version, if you like, of the bait
yeah.
as a soup, as a cloud.
I'm guessing if you use a bait boat as well, you could just drop a pile of that liquid over the top.
Yeah,
Um,
yeah. Pile of it over the top, over some pellet or over whole boilie.
in
Um,
in fact, I will with the pressure still being quite high this week and it being cool, and maybe I'll just fish zigs and do that crushed sort of liquid mix. Just
I
drop
wonder
it
if there's
over
any
the
way you
top of
could
the
have like a
zigs.
pot. I wonder if you could have a pot in the bait boat hopper the right way up.
Yeah.
with like a bit of line coming to the back of the boat,
Just
and you fill
falls
it up with
out.
liquid, and you drive it out there without spilling it. And then
Yeah.
when you open the hopper and the pot drops,
Yeah.
it'd pour all you create a proper cloud, wouldn't you?
Yeah. I'm sure for the
There is a liquid dropper that hangs on the back
yeah.
of one of the boats, isn't there?
I've seen one, but like you said, you could make one fairly easily.
Yeah, make
All
one
you
out of
need
just
is
a yeah.
cut a bottle in half,
Yeah, a bottle with a bit of cord so it flips when it drops out.
yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah, a bit of cork with maybe a weight on the bottom so it actually
yeah.
pulls it out. Yeah. But
So
the
yeah,
weight of
just
the liquid will pull it out
oh yeah,
anyway.
it'll drop out. But I think if you had like a string at the bottom, so you knew it went turned upside down.
Yeah.
But if it just dropped into the water where the hopper opens, something that stayed upright in the boat, if
Yeah.
you take the door away, it's just going to tip, isn't it?
Yeah.
Yeah, you want a bit of string so you don't lose it out there every time.
Yeah. Yeah.
And then drag it back. But yeah, definitely a boily pot, a boily soup, finer than a porridge.
Yeah.
That's the key to put that. That's that thing like you were saying when the one fish crapped over the top of the others and the others went off looking for food.
Mm.
You don't need to give them a lot of solid then, but you're giving them boily. The
Yeah.
weight of boil. There's still a handful of boilies in your pot full of soup, isn't there?
Yeah, and that so here could be the strategy for when I know they're probably not feeding on the bottom. It's been super
Mm,
cold. We've had -7s. Most of the lakes are frozen. That hardly ever freezes because it's so deep.
mm.
Um, so that could be the way. Fish two rods on the zigs, and then
Yeah,
intermittent 3 or 4 times a day. Just go and drop a pot of liquid out
drop a pot of yeah,
over
nice
the top.
milky slop over the top. Yeah,
Yeah, but as an experiment, fish
one rod
one
on the
rod
deck.
just to the side on the bottom and see if it can
Yeah,
trigger a feeding
I'd have it in the
result.
middle almost, wouldn't you? Yeah, I'd have my bait in the middle, zigs either side at different depths,
Yeah,
just randomly. Well, you'll get a drift as well, so the cloud will move whichever way the wind's blowing, won't it? If
yeah,
it's a deep water, it'll probably go with the wind initially, and then maybe with the tow
and then
back
come
again.
back. Yeah, yeah,
Yeah,
yeah.
but it's
But
got to be worth trying.
there is big undertow on there. Like it's just one of them
Mm,
lakes. As soon as the wind gets up, your lines are going the opposite way.
yeah,
Quite often the opposite way to the wind. But I always think when you drop bait, like because the undertows they're different at different depths, aren't they? So I always
they
think it
are.
still
Yeah,
probably ends up roughly where you dropped it. Because it goes one way then back the other usually. Um,
it's an eye opener where it ends up. Last winter, I got one of these fisheye cameras, and
yeah.
I was playing around with that in the bait boat. And
Mm,
I popped a marker float up on the clay pit, 18 foot. So we had 28-foot water in front of me. So it wasn't the deepest, but it
mm,
was just off my near margin, 18 foot. And it's a nice little flat spot where we can sort of flattish spot where we can catch. So I popped the float up. I drove the bait boat till it's banged the float. And I've just dropped a load of just 15 mil Esterblen boilies. And you imagine they're going to go straight to the bottom.
yeah.
So I've wound the camera down on the remote control, trying to catch up with the boilies and I've got them. There they are. And then the boat, I've just put the handset down. The boat's drifting with the wind, and it's blowing from my left to my right, all the way back. I'm seeing boilies, and it's
Really?
like
So it had gone
yeah,
along with the
yeah,
wind.
yeah. They had gone with the wind, like 10, 12, 14 foot, some of them. And it's
Really?
like I drove back to where the float was, and there were some boilies there, but there was a line of boilies. And then it got a bit weirder because we were scattering boilies out, and there's lots of different angles on the pits, these clay pits, and you think you got your boilies dotted around, and
Mm.
with the camera, I was finding big areas with no boilies at all, and then they'd all congregate where there might be a rock or a depression or a bit of stick, so they'd all group together in like naturally the water movement on roach and other stuff was moving them. So you'd have a pile of boilies, but then you'd have 6, 8 foot with no boilies. Even though you've been throwing them loose, pitter pattering all over the water, so you'd think there's a boilie every 6 inches. And it
That
wouldn't. There'd be 20 boilies in a heap here, 10 there, 6 there. And there
that's
was a
really
line. There was
interesting.
one bit was mental. There was a log laying on the bottom and it had a line of boilies laying along it.
So
And I was
it's
like,
like
holy shit, it's like a stringer.
there's a cliche saying about water finding its own level. So if you have a leak in your house or something, it'll always end up in one place, won't it? And I guess it's the same
Yeah.
thing for bait in water then.
Yeah, these baits they were all there was no it wasn't if it was a flat bottom silty lake then yeah of course they're going to be dotted around and plugged in but this
Surely,
was hard bottoms and slopes and angles and they were
surely they're
all
the hot
good.
spots then.
Yeah.
If you knew
Yes.
could
Yeah.
because you could think you're fishing over your bait and the best spot's 6 foot away.
Your bait can be miles away.
Yeah.
It's mental. I would have never guessed it until I actually physically got this little camera, wound it down, and watched it. And
And
what we found was when we're casting or boating over, if we're landing on the lovely smooth bit, we're obviously sometimes our rigs are on the slope, and
yeah,
it's the only bait there's the hook bait
yeah,
because the other stuff is in all these little piles that are gradually with the water movement and with little fish and other stuff and the
they've found their
chop,
own level.
they're all finding a level which is not the ones that your one won't find it because the lead's pinning it in the wrong spot.
And
It's interesting, it really is.
I've always wondered why some spots are spots, because sometimes anglers get to learn that in this swim, just that bit over there, no, you're not fishing it quite right. Even if that feels the nicest bit, for some reason, that
Mm,
bit over there is the banker spot. And I wonder if it's just things like that, because if food
a
bait
food
you're
trap.
introducing is
That's
landing
the way to
there,
think of it, isn't it? A
it's a
trap.
food trap. Yeah.
Yeah,
So if you can find the trap, because don't forget, let's say this trap is 8 foot away from an obvious feature. Everyone's fishing to the obvious feature. The
yeah,
fish are getting a free feed 6 foot away or 8 foot away
definitely. Oh
because
yeah,
they're
and it
never getting
happens.
caught
Yeah.
there.
No, the lead
Uh,
is holding it by the, like I said, the bit that's always fished, and the free bait and the safe bait could have congregated elsewhere. And I think especially people who have sort of spotted a bit of particle out and stuff that's light, things that are sinking at different rates. Pellets are even lighter than boilies. Like, they move quite a long way, I reckon.
So yeah, we need technology. We
Well,
need the
I like
underwater
I
cameras.
like getting in when I can and sort of and stamping around on the bottom and things like that. And now I've got a few friends who sort of we do it. We jump up and down, make little flat ledges, and try and make sort of depressions and all sorts. And it's I think thinking of it as a food trap when they drain the lakes down, we'll see the carp holes where they fell, obviously, and there's a divot. But that's another place that's going to trap food. It's a hollow or a depression. But the eye openers that we had were on the slopes where it would be a stick or a rock, and the boilies were trapped in little lines and little clusters, little piles.
I wonder
And
if
I was
there's
like,
a
yeah, this is
an implement you
interesting.
could make to go on the bottom of a prodding stick or something. So that
Yeah,
yeah,
like a
like a
footprint.
big
Yeah,
flat, almost like
yeah,
one of the big things the
uh,
bricklayers use, the hod,
yeah. You
the
want to, yeah,
flat things.
make make nice little hollows, and then you got to try and get your hook bait in it.
Yeah, well, as long as you know where it is. But I
Yeah.
so I guess some of them will happen naturally just by fish
Oh yes.
feeding. So if a fish make
Yeah.
a foot carp hole, then
Yeah.
bait's naturally going to end up in
Yeah.
there and
Going to gather
probably other
into it. Yeah.
food, you know.
Yeah.
Um,
And then they gradually get bigger, don't they, as well? I mean, that's another odd theory I've got, or odd thing I've puzzled about. Be interesting what you think. Some waters, people will stress, like you were talking earlier, spot within a spot. The
hmm,
spot is critical. And I think guys, if they rely on like single hook baits, stringer, solid bag, then the accuracy of finding that spot must is probably important.
hmm,
But if you, someone like myself, if I've turned up and I know that out in front of me is a good bit, and I've just catapulted or spawned kilo of boilies all over it, then
yeah.
I can't see that the carp will only feed on the spot that the anglers tell you, oh, they're very spotty in here. They've got to be on that to the inch. I thought, well, they can't only eat those and ignore the other 900 grams of boilies that have landed elsewhere, can they? So
Or
whether they
but maybe they
start on the
haven't landed
spot,
elsewhere.
maybe they haven't now.
Well,
That's
not
yeah,
landed, but ended up elsewhere.
that's true. Yeah, they could be. They could be that
They'll
they
have
are yeah, the hotspots
concentrated themselves. Yeah.
could be the yeah, like we said, the food traps. Yeah.
I know some anglers. I'm thinking of one in particular, is a very well-known German angler. Anyway, the first thing he does when he gets in a swim, he doesn't look for. So obviously, I'm talking about the Croatia lakes, which are sort of match
Mm,
style fishing. They're about how well you fish, as opposed to the spots, because these lakes they will
yeah.
have these natural carp holes and crevices, but generally, they're not weedy like ours.
Mm,
The water's a bit fresher and there's higher volumes of fish, so there is competition for food. So you think your thought process is slightly different. But one of them, what he does is before he's even found where he's going to fish, he's just chose to swim, and then he'll fill it in with a throwing stick for 2, 3, 4 hours. He'll literally
Right.
scatter, 20 to 30 kilo before he even starts, just
Mm.
scatter it all over the swim. Doesn't really care where
Doesn't care where it goes. Yeah.
where it goes, short, long, everything. Then they'll choose the distance they want to fish. They might have a lead around. Then two of them will fish next to each other, three rods each, and they'll cover the distance between each other. But one or two rods always account for most of the fish. And I'm wondering if
Yeah.
that's where a lot of this bait they put in has just settled and
Could be congregating. Yeah.
and become the sort of the area to fish. So I'm
I've
wondering,
got a feeling, I think one of Hutchie's earliest books, probably Carp Strikes Back,
mm,
he did little diagrams of the bars in Save,
yeah,
and he talked about a hot spot where I'm sure he shows the flow, and there was like a series of bars and a gap and another bar, and there
yeah,
was little arrows drawn on it, and I'm sure he sort of talked about like the congregation and the fish would come to this area, and it
yeah.
was a food trap from like multiple directions. I've got it behind me on the shelf. I'm gonna have a look later.
Yeah, I've got it somewhere. Food
But I
food
think, yeah,
traps.
yeah, that's a new one. Yeah, we've got to create traps, food traps,
Yeah.
and then yeah, because I've seen them with the camera. Funny enough, the new lake come on. I haven't took the camera there yet, but I'm itching to now, just to start to see whether they are. I know they will because it's all smooth. There's a bit of weeds. It's hard bottomed. And there's going to be even subtle depressions. That's what I found on the clay pit. It didn't. You wouldn't have been able to find it with a plumbing float. It was too subtle.
Yeah.
You're talking 8, 10 centimeters, few inches in a crease going along, and that was what trapped the boilies. But
Yeah.
then the next 3, 4 foot, which was all smooth, lovely gravel. Uh,
Wow. Well, we've coined a new carp term. We've been chatting for hour and 20 minutes, something like that. So it's probably a good time to draw it to a close. Let's have something else you wanted to cover.
I think that's brilliant, mate. For a second one, thoroughly enjoyed it.
Lovely, jubbly. Well, thank you for your time once again. I'll get this out over the next week, and
Absolute pleasure, mate. And I'll
uh,
post you some of that lamb MSG.
yeah, I'll put the link. I'll put the link to your
And
company,
yeah,
Mirage
yeah, make
Baits.
up some Ester blend soup and
Yeah,
pour it on top of their heads.
that's definitely one of the day. I wasn't particularly enthralled about fishing next week, so I thought it's probably a waste of time. But now I've got something to try. That it's
Yeah,
probably a good time to try it
and
when
it'll be
things are
different.
not
I
good.
mean, you've got a bait that's unique anyway, but that'll be a
Yep,
presentation that's unique.
yep. Definitely. I've had a lot of messages about our last chat about people wanting to get on the bay and liking the sound of the one
Oh,
that
it's been
you've
encouraging. Yeah, I've had messages as well, and new customers sort of having a selection of bits and pieces. And
lovely.
yeah, a
Well,
lot of positives. It was really
let,
good.
let me test it if it works, and maybe we can brand it Cartcast or something and allow
More than happy to.
listeners to be able to get hold of it because I've seen a couple of your field testers as well say, oh, I want that one.
I know. I've had to tell people they can't have it.
Let's get it tested, get a few fish on it, and maybe we can let people have it.
But yeah, we can do it that way. Yeah, so yeah, we can brand it that way. But no,
Okay, so
be lucky, mate.
get yourself to Mirage Baits website. I'll put the link underneath, and thank you.
Thank you very much.
Cheers, Marcus. Speak soon.
Cheers.
Bye bye.
Bye bye.